In 1950, a new archbishop was installed as leader of the Greek Orthodox Church in Cyprus. He took the name Makarios III. Like the great leaders of the medieval church, he was more politician than priest. The British were slow to realize what kind of man they were dealing with. Under Makarios' leadership, every priest was a nationalist politician. Every congregation was potentially a subversive meeting. What the Greek Cypriots yearned for was not independence, but union with Greece, which they called Enosis. The British tried to stop the teaching of Enosis. They made it a crime. But the church found ways round this.
Και είπα, αφού μαζεύτηκαν όλοι οι κοινότητες, απόψε κύριοι ήρθαμε στο χωριό σας για να κηρύξουμε την Επανάσταση. Ζήτω η Επανάσταση. Το επανέλαβα 2-3 φορές. Όλος ο λαός εχειροκροτούσε, εφώναζε. Η αστυνομία προχώρησε να εκτελέσει αυτό που με είχε στην αρχή απειλήσει, να με συλλάβει. Όταν επλησίασε, εγώ προσέθεσα. Ήρθαμε να κηρύξουμε την Επανάσταση ενάντια στην αμαρτία. Τότε πάγωσαν, σταμάτησαν και επεχώρησαν. Και εγώ μίλησα ενάντια στην αμαρτία. Βέβαια, στο τέλος ομιλίας μίλησα και εθνικά. Η αστυνομία όχι μόνο δεν προσήλθε να με συλλάβει, αλλά πρώτη εχειροκροτούσε.
Makarios set out to win support in Greece itself. He met with an enthusiastic response. But just as the Greek people took up the cry of Enosis, events elsewhere in the Mediterranean threatened their cause. In 1952, a group of army officers led by Colonel Nasser seized power in Egypt, determined to evict British troops from the Suez Canal zone. The chiefs of staff decided to move the Middle East headquarters to Cyprus. Here, unlike Egypt, Britain was sovereign and could not be thrown out by a hostile regime. This conflict between the Cypriots' desire for union with Greece and Britain's new need for Cyprus led Henry Hopkinson, a junior minister in the Colonial Office, to make a blunder which ended his ministerial career and brought Cyprus world prominence. In July 1954, the Labour opposition began to ask why the Cypriots, the most highly educated colonial people, had so little say in managing their own affairs. With the Tory party already worried about withdrawal from Suez, the government's statement on Cyprus would be a tricky one to make.
I made my statement in the House, and it went all right. Jim Griffiths, who had been Colonial Secretary for the Labour Party, got up and asked whether he could take it, that it was the intention that Cyprus should eventually attain what he called dominion status, with the right to determine their own future. And of course this put me in a great difficulty, because that was the one thing that I'd been told definitely by the Secretary of State when he returned from Cabinet that morning that I must not do. So I had to tread very carefully. I said there are certain territories which owing to their particular circumstances can never expect to be fully independent.
The word never rang around the world. This was just what Makarios had been waiting for. The uproar compelled the Greek Prime Minister to raise the issue at the United Nations.
He decided to go to the UN. And I don't blame him, he couldn't politically avoid it. Well, he couldn't avoid it because when a whole people believes that something is easy, especially when it believes that something is right, that a Greek island should be given to Greece. A government cannot resist forever, it can resist for some years. He can't say to the people, I'm right and you are all wrong, especially when they are right.
At the United Nations, the Greek government requested the right of self-determination for the Cypriots, the chance to decide their own future, confident that they would choose Enosis. Britain managed to muster enough votes to defeat the Greek resolution, and Makarios' disappointment and anger were shared by the Greek Cypriots in Nicosia.
I was quite young. I saw the demonstration. I decided to follow the demonstrators. I started to throw stones to the police. I saw this demonstration as a starting for the freedom.
A month earlier, in a remote corner of the island, a Cypriot had landed secretly. He came home to revolutionize the Enosis movement.
It had been said that the Cypriots did not really want their freedom, and that if they did want their freedom, they would seek it through actions of violence.
Colonel George Grivas was a Cypriot who had fought in the Greek army and led an extreme right-wing guerrilla group in Greece. He was consumed with zeal for Enosis.
An armed fight was the only way leading to the self-determination of my native country, Cyprus.
He took the name Digenis after a legendary Greek hero. He kept his real identity a mystery. While Cyprus resumed an outward calm, Grivas was forging a secret army, EOKA, the national organization of Cypriot fighters. He imported arms, hand-picked recruits, and selected his targets.
I was asleep in the hotel opposite the police station, and the Greek officer in charge of the police station rang me up saying, Mr. Denktash, all over Cyprus explosions are happening. Will you come to the police station? Well, I said, you must be a very nasty man to wake me up at this hour and to play on me the 1st of April Fool Days, you know, making jokes with me. He said, it's no joke, come down immediately, Mr. Denktash, for heaven's sake. And I went down, and there it was on the wireless from all over Cyprus, bombs here, bombs there, and they had started.
If our rulers refuse to give us back our freedom, we shall claim it, with our own hands and with our own blood. EOKA, the leader, Digenis.
What you need to be a member of this organization was that you must be, at that time, a right-wing, belong to the right-wing party. I mean, right-wing, you are all except the leftist, the communist. I mean, they check your character. I mean, let's say if you are going around in bars, drinking or having affairs with people that they didn't, I mean, have a good name, they wouldn't choose you to be a member of the organization. You must have a good character.
Ήταν παιδιά που εξομολογούνται τακτικά, κοινωνούσαν τακτικά. Και το Μυρμήκι να το σκοτώσουν δεν το ήθελα. Όταν όμως εκλήθησαν στον αγώνα, φυσικά έκαναν το καθήκον τους και έγραψαν την ωραιότερη σελίδα της ιστορίας της Κύπρου. Έχω ορκίσει πάρα πολλούς νέους.
I swear in the name of the Holy Trinity that I shall work with all my power for the liberation of Cyprus from the British yoke, sacrificing for this even my life.
They ordered me to execute to execute a Greek Cypriot in the main road, very busy road. And believe me, I pissed drop by drop in my underwear, because it was the first time I got a pistol. Very soon he arrived. I aimed, I fired twice. For a long time I saw this person in my dreams, even when I didn't sleep, I saw his face in front of me. Well, it was the first experience anyway. But later you can can say that after a lot of training and after some more killings, you get used to killing.
The British looked to Archbishop Makarios to denounce EOKA's use of violence. They tried to pin him down.
I am opposed to the use of violence, but at the same time, I am opposed to the British policy which has provoked violence. However, I don't think wise to condemn violence in public, because I understand that a Greek section of the people is in favor of this method.
The British were baffled by the failure of this man of God to condemn violence. They didn't realize he was EOKA's founder and its commander-in-chief.
Yes, Makarios, on his way to the United Nations, while we have had this meeting with Grivas in Athens, gave him the green light to come to Cyprus and gave him money to pay the transportation. But he told him that you go there, you continue organizing things, but you will not start unless you receive an order from me. He did not want the revolution with battles and guns and machine guns and submachine guns. He was thinking of an explosion here, a demonstration there, some shooting to help or escape. And, well, this is the ideas he was having by that time. Of course, the other man was having, Grivas was having completely different ideas.
To the police, do not try to block our path or you will stain it with your blood. Anyone who tries to arrest or search Cypriot patriots will be shot. EOKA, the leader, Digenis.
On the 1st of April, everyone looked upon this movement as the movement of misguided few under the guidance of the church, and even Greek police. There were very good CID men in the police force, excellent people, who looked upon it as just a criminal activity by misguided youth. And they were very effective in catching these people. But the terrorism towards informers, towards the police who followed them, was such that within 6 months, I know, the people who were saying this is the criminal activity of a misguided few were saying, we are EOKA too.
By the summer of 1955, EOKA's campaign was attracting world attention to the Greek Cypriot cause. Britain turned for support to the other country that had reason to fear a Greek takeover of the island.
There has never been a time when British sovereignty over Cyprus was more vital than in the present day. The fears and anxieties of Turkey are constantly forgotten. Turkey that ruled Cyprus for 300 years. Turkey that is only 40 miles away from the shores of Cyprus.
Turkey was not just worried about Greek troops near her shores, but also about the minority population. Almost 20% of the Cypriots were Turkish. They were alarmed to see Britain's control slipping. EOKA's bombs went off all over Cyprus. Policemen leaked the government's anti-terrorist plans. Customs men helped EOKA smuggle arms into the island. To reassert British authority, the government turned to its top soldier, Field Marshal Sir John Harding, Chief of the Imperial General Staff, and appointed him Governor of Cyprus.
Sir John, the Greek Foreign Minister said this morning that your appointment meant that Britain was going to war with Cyprus. Would you say that that was an exaggeration?
Well, I'm very sorry that he's taken up that attitude, because as far as I'm concerned, there's no question of war at all. In fact, I believe that the sooner people settle down peacefully and quietly together, the sooner we can get a proper answer to this business.
My impression is that the new governor, Field Marshal Sir John Harding, is an intelligent and straightforward man. This is the reason I believe that he will suggest to his government to recognize the right of Cyprus people to self-determination for Britain's prestige and the pacification on this area.
Impressed by the governor's reasonable attitude, Makarios made Harding an offer that he would drop his demand for Enesis immediately and he would renounce violence if in return the British promised they would eventually grant self-determination. Harding visited London to consult the cabinet, and he returned to Cyprus with a carefully worded new policy.
The governor came from London, and we met in our house in Nicosia the 21st of November, 1955. I remember that day, Marshal Harding came first, 10 minutes earlier. Maybe for security reasons. And Makarios came a few minutes later. And immediately, Marshal Harding took over from his pocket a paper. He gave it to Makarios and he said, "Your Beatitude, I have very good news for you."
The paper gave the new British formula. It is not our position that the principle of self-determination can never be applicable to Cyprus. It is our position that it is not now a practical proposition on account of the present situation in the Eastern Mediterranean. This became known as the double negative. In simple words, it meant Enesis, not never, but not now.
The Archbishop said, Your Excellency, I cannot accept this. And Harding he was very disappointed. He left immediately, without waiting even to have the sweets and the coffee we usually offered in Cyprus in such occasions, you know. And I read the paper, and I was really surprised, because it was the first time the British government recognized the right of self-determination to the people of Cyprus. When Marshal Harding left, the Archbishop told me, well, that we have in our pocket. And we must try now to make it better.
The weeks passed. Britain made no better offer. Harding prepared for war. EOKA stepped up its violence. After 8 weeks, the two sides attempted another round of talks.
Though latest reports give hope of a settlement in Cyprus, tension in that troubled island is as high as ever. Field Marshal Sir John Harding, Governor of Cyprus, newly returned from London, has his 7th and most crucial meeting with Archbishop Makarios, leader of the island's demand for union with Greece.
He made what seemed to me an eloquent, even moving personal appeal to the Archbishop to give his people a lead away from violence. Even the Archbishop seemed to me to be impressed, but after a short pause he said, you must understand Sir John, that I cannot lead my people where they will not go. And the Field Marshal, in exasperation, turned to me and said under his breath, funny sort of leadership to my way of thinking.
Instead of the straight answer Harding was hoping for, Makarios asked for time to consult his council. A deal seemed to be in sight, but Makarios had one more advisor to consult, George Grivas. Makarios had brought him to Cyprus, but EOKA fighters were now heroes, and EOKA weapons, bought with the church's money, were in Grivas's hands. Could Makarios persuade him to lay them down? They met at Kiko Monastery, while Grivas's men stood guard outside.
Grivas told Makarios that I don't trust the British, and his opinion was that if we are given amnesty, if we are given the police security, then we could sign an agreement.
Makarios wrote to Harding agreeing to renounce violence if these few small details could just be settled first.
As far as I was concerned, it was no good continuing the negotiations. We'd come to a dead end. And so I recommended to the Colonial Secretary that he should come out.
Makarios had high hopes of new concessions from the Colonial Secretary, Alan Lennox Boyd. He, however, thought the terms Harding had already offered were sufficient to impress the world and the House of Commons.
Lennox Boyd read a statement immediately saying that this I'm going to tell in the House. Still, 3 points were pending: the amnesty, the public security, and the majority in the House. So the Archbishop wanted to clarify those 3 questions. And Lennox Boyd said immediately, no, accept it or not. I didn't come here to negotiate. You have already negotiated to the governor. The Archbishop insisted and said, well, let's talk about this subject. Why not?
I think the truth is that ministers in London and perhaps the governor in Cyprus also had been becoming increasingly exasperated at what they saw as the prevarication of the Archbishop as the talks wore on, and increasingly disillusioned about the possibility of ever reaching a viable political settlement with him.
Lennox Boyd was adamant. He said, no, receive it or not. And the Archbishop said, well, under these conditions, I'm not going to accept it. And then Lennox Boyd stood up. He was 2 meters tall, you know. He closed his file and he said, addressing to the Archbishop, he said, Archbishop, God save your people. And he left.
Makarios had held out too long. The only terms ever offered the Cypriots which could have led to Enosis were withdrawn.
So I said to Lennox Boyd, I told Lennox Boyd that in my opinion the only thing to be done then was for me to concentrate on inflicting a defeat on EOKA. If that was done, if that was to be the program, well then I must get Makarios out of the way.
Makarios left for the airport to fly to Athens to discuss his next move. But the British had arranged for him to go somewhere else. They took him 3,500 miles away to the Seychelles Islands, where he was to be detained in exile indefinitely. The deportation of Archbishop Makarios prompted EOKA to put into action their most audacious attack. In March 1956, a young waiter in Government House smuggled a time bomb past the governor's security forces, strapped to his stomach with a lady's corset.
I get immediately to the bedroom of the governor. I closed the door, and immediately I took the bomb out of my corset, and I put it in the mattress under the bed. You see, they were sleeping on separate beds. They were nearby the beds, but they were separate, 2 beds, you know. And closed the beds just to kill both of them. Not to have her to cry after him, you know.
I always get up very late, I'm sorry to say, in the morning, and I had only just got up and nobody had done the room or made the bed or anything. And one of the soldiers came in, opened the doors between the bedrooms and said, "There's a bomb in His Excellency's bed." So I went and looked, and there was this thing. I'd never seen a bomb before, but there was this bomb there, and I very nearly touched it with flicked it with my fingers, and I said, well, it must be a dud, because it was there all night. A young officer who was very brave put the bomb on a shovel. He'd walked right through Government House, which was quite big, and he'd put it in a sandbag pit, and it was striking 12, and it went off 3 minutes after he'd put it in with the most sickening explosion that broke all the windows outside of the house.
Neophytos Sophocleus became a wanted man and was taken to the mountains to join the guerrilla bands under EOKA commander Colonel George Grivas.
The anti-terrorist campaign in Cyprus reaches a new stage with the combing of 400 square miles of mountain forests in the southwest of the island. Somewhere in the thick forest in front of them are EOKA leaders with a big price on their head, including, it is believed, the chief of them all, George Grivas.
One British patrol stumbled across Grivas washing himself in a mountain stream, but he escaped and went underground. For the next 2.5 years, he directed his war from this house on the outskirts of Limassol. Under the kitchen sink was the entrance to a cleverly concealed hideout. Not even his area commander knew where he was, but from this refuge, Grivas dispatched orders to his execution squads in the towns.
Metaxa Square, Nicosia, and a surprise swoop by men of the 3rd Parachute Battalion searching for concealed weapons. The day before, in a nearby street, 2 Royal Air Force men were brutally murdered and 1 seriously wounded by terrorists. The men, wearing civilian clothes, were shot from behind in cold blood.
If they give me the guns, if they give us the guns, the armored cars, and everything that they got, we can fight face to face. I mean, we feel brave as they are, I mean, at that time. But they got everything on their side, and they wanted us, I mean, to come and fight with them face by face. How we can fight face by face?
A search was started immediately while the scent was still fresh, but no trace was found. The town is now out of bounds to servicemen off duty.
Harding's first task was to get the information to find EOKA. The killers melted into the population, and the people knew what EOKA would do to a traitor.
He revealed to the enemy the hideout I was living, and I decided and I executed him.
What did you say to him?
Nothing.
What happened?
I didn't go by myself personally. I sent some boys to kill him. He was shot in the head, dead. No explanation, no messing, no... If you're a traitor, you have to die. That's all. It was clear to all of us.
Harding set out to strengthen the police, now thoroughly infiltrated by EOKA. So he created an auxiliary police force, recruited from the 20% minority in the population, the Turkish Cypriots.
We were against EOKA. Britain was against EOKA. Therefore, we had a joint interest in seeing that EOKA did not succeed.
As the Turks were recruited as Britain's law enforcers, they also became the targets of EOKA gunmen. Some said it was deliberate British policy to set Greek against Turk and divide and rule.
We couldn't bring a whole horde of policemen from elsewhere in to do duties of that kind. And so really we had no choice in the matter.
Harding introduced tough emergency laws. He punished whole villages with collective fines and curfews. Troops and police rounded up suspects, and thousands were detained without trial. But suspects had to be made to talk.
They took me to the special branch. They took off all my clothes. They tied me by the back, my hands and back, my foot, and they beat me for a lot. Then they asked, somebody came, a Cypriot came, Onisiforos, who started beating me. He was always either drunk or taking drugs. He was really mad with me. He was crying one time. He was laughing the other time. I mean, he was a man unbalanced. He was taking a stick to put in my bottom. He was taking some clothes, put it in the water, and then put it in my face so that not to breathe. He was he threw me down and he started dancing on my stomach with. He was wearing boots.
Nikos Koshis described 12 days of torture before interrogators abandoned efforts to make him talk. Many Cypriots made similar allegations of torture, and Athens radio broadcast every charge. In Britain, the Labour Party demanded an inquiry into these allegations of brutality, but the government stood by Harding.
I had sufficient confidence in my senior police officers and army commanders to accept their view that this didn't happen.
Harding believed he had a more effective way of making the Cypriots talk. In November 1956, he introduced the death penalty for anyone caught with a weapon. Interrogators could now bargain with suspects for information or their lives. Harding's methods started to produce results. Hooded informers led British soldiers to EOKA hideouts. As EOKA's leaders were captured one by one, Grievous's second-in-command, Grigoris Avsentiu, told his men that he would never surrender. A fight to the death would restore EOKA's support. In March 1957, British troops discovered Avsentiu's hideout in a cave high in the Troodos Mountains. So confident were the British that they invited newsreel cameras to film this important capture. The battle raged for 6 hours as Avsentiu and his aide Matrosos fought it out with British soldiers. The British became impatient. They poured petrol into the cave and set fire to it.
I was in front of the exit and the flame took me from the face. Instantly, I covered my face, my eyes, and my hands also bad. I feel bad. I turn again to the Avsentiu. I saw him in flames. And he shouted me, "Don't be afraid." It was the last word I heard from Avsentiu. I jumped off the cave with the hope that a bullet will, somebody will shoot me. I didn't want to live, and I didn't want to die by flames.
Matrosos was found lying stunned at the bottom of the hill.
They removed some stones from the roof and they saw Avsentiu was burned.
The movement had found its martyr. Though EOKA's mountain gangs had been destroyed, the Greek Cypriots had demonstrated the will to fight on.
I don't believe myself that you can destroy an organization of that kind, which is led by fanatics and has a great deal of support from the civil population, either from sympathy or from fear. I don't know you can destroy it, but we had inflicted a very serious defeat on them.
Harding's forces were now in command, but no new leaders had come forward to replace Makarios and speak for the Greek community. Politically, there was a stalemate. By the beginning of 1957, Britain was reeling from a blow which changed her attitude to Cyprus and to her whole empire. Sir Anthony Eaton's attempt to reconquer the Suez Canal had ended in disaster, and he had resigned. His successor, Harold Macmillan, though an imperialist in style, was a realist in practice and thought the whole of Cyprus was no longer needed. A small base would do. But if the British wanted to negotiate, they would have to talk to the Archbishop. He was released from detention, but forbidden to set foot in Cyprus. On the 17th of April 1957, Makarios arrived in Athens to a hero's welcome. The release of the Archbishop angered Turkey, which already feared a British withdrawal. The colonial secretary, Lennox Boyd, had visited Ankara to suggest there was a way to protect the Turkish Cypriots when the British pulled out.
And when that happened, the Turks in Cyprus would be as entitled as the Greeks in Cyprus to have their own self-determination, and that, of course, would it then involve the partition of the island.
I remember maps drawn in blood with the Turkish flag on top of it. Partition became the cause célèbre, as they say at the time. Partition or death became the slogan.
Makarios refused even to come to talks if Turkey were represented. Macmillan wrote in his diary, "It really is one of the most baffling problems I can remember." The solution he hit upon was a new governor, not a soldier, but a conciliator, Sir Hugh Foot, Michael Foot's brother and a known friend of the Greeks.
On taking up his appointment as governor 4 weeks ago, Sir Hugh was asked to make his report on the troubled island. Since then, at great personal risk, he has toured Greek and Turkish villages, seeking the views of the people themselves.
I said at the time I was rather pleased with myself. Things had gone rather well. I got a good deal of publicity from these acts. No great substance perhaps in them, but they were indications of an anxious anxiety to work with the people. And then the terrible consequence.
Foot's friendly gestures to the Greeks only convinced the Turkish Cypriots their protectors had abandoned them. On the night of the 7th of June 1958, the peaceful coexistence of the two communities ended forever.
There was an explosion at the information bureau of the Turkish consulate. A crowd had already gathered there, a crowd of Turkish Cypriot youth. And they all almost immediately decided that Greeks had done it. And they were swearing vengeance against the Greeks and so on.
The explosion started a night of rioting in Nicosia. Turkish Cypriots burnt and looted Greek shops and houses. Soon, EOKA counterattacked, and the fighting spread around the island. British soldiers put up barricades to keep the two communities apart. Partition was fast becoming a reality, as ordinary people were murdered merely because they were Greek or Turkish. The fighting raged for 3 months. More than 100 were killed. Against this background, Macmillan and Foot tried to launch a new initiative.
The task which the British government has set itself
is to see whether we could bring about at least some temporary period of calm and peace in the island. That means a great effort by all concerned.
Macmillan offered to share the governing of Cyprus with Greece and Turkey. On the surface, a generous and even-handed offer. But to the Greeks, to have Turkey installed as a ruler of an island they claimed was part of Greece was a nightmare come true.
The Greek people of Cyprus will oppose by all means the unilateral application of this plan. If the British government insists on its plan, the result will be disastrous.
Macmillan warned the Greeks that this plan would be imposed in 2 months' time, unless they compromised.
This time it wasn't a question of going to beg them in Athens and Greece. The idea was now we should go and tell them that we're going ahead with this. And you've got to accommodate yourself to it. I think that made a main difference.
In desperation, Makarios turned to the British Labour Party, who had promised to grant Enosis when they won power. He asked Barbara Castle to Athens, but she brought bad news. They too would back the Macmillan plan, unless Makarios compromised.
Oh, he's prepared to make a very important change indeed. He has offered to accept the status of independence for Cyprus on condition that Cyprus shall not be linked either with Turkey or with Greece. In other words, he says, rule out partition and rule out union with Greece and let Cyprus be an independent state whose new position shall be guaranteed by the United Nations. Now, this is a very hopeful new development and offers a way out of the present deadlock.
We were terribly astonished when, out of the blue, one day, Barbara Castle, who was a noblewoman, came out and said, Makarios has proposed me independence. We remained completely astonished.
Grivas was also astonished. He had not been consulted, and 2 days after the Archbishop's concession, he issued this command. He ordered EOKA to strike at will against the British, soldiers and civilians alike.
It was here in Famagusta that the most brutal outrage of all outrages in Cyprus took place. 2 British women deliberately shot in the back. Mrs. Cutliff died at once, and Mrs. Robinson was gravely wounded. Both were wives of servicemen. An intensive search for the murderers began at once. It would be surprising indeed if the troops, naturally enraged by this cold-blooded act of EOKA thugs, had carried out their search and made their arrests with kid-glove methods. All must surely have felt that this was the most poignant of the many tragedies of the tragic situation in Cyprus.
World opinion was so outraged that Grivas denied responsibility. But EOKA resumed the killing of British servicemen. For the British, it seemed to be getting worse and worse. At the United Nations, the problem was about to be taken out of their hands. Greek Foreign Minister Averoff proposed independence for Cyprus as his last chance to defeat the Macmillan plan and to keep Turkey out. Turkish Foreign Minister Zorlu backed the Macmillan plan.
In fact, on Cyprus, there are 2 national communities.
And at the end of a grueling debate, the Greeks were defeated.
We went with some members of the delegation at the end of a corridor to smoke. And we were frantic, of course, desperate. Because there are also questions of internal policy. How do you go back in the country beaten in an international forum? Then I saw Zorlu coming towards me. I told my people there, he's coming here. I am afraid I'll slap him in the face. I'm so nervous, I don't think I will be able to keep my nerves. So he came smiling and he told me,
I came to congratulate you.
To Averoff's amazement, Zorlu proposed a deal. Turkey would accept independence for Cyprus if they could agree guarantees to protect the Turkish minority. Over the next few weeks, they worked out the details of their plan. And 2 months later in Zurich, their prime ministers approved their proposal.
Mr. Zorlu, as Turkish foreign minister, are you happy with the agreement you have reached with Greece?
I am completely happy.
Why has it taken so long and cost so many lives before this agreement was reached?
This is a difficult question because the matter was a very complicated one, and the national pride and too much emotion was involved in this dispute.
Averoff and Zorlu flew straight to London, where the British Foreign Secretary, Selwyn Lloyd, was delighted with a solution that let Britain escape from Cyprus and yet retain 2 military bases. The leaders of the Turkish and Greek Cypriots were then invited to Lancaster House to ratify these proposals. This conference was to be only a signing ceremony. Details agreed in Zurich could not be changed, and Makarios had promised Greek Prime Minister Karamanlis that he would accept the deal.
Outside Lancaster House, even the fog was lifting as Foreign Secretary Selwyn Lloyd arrived for the conference on Cyprus. To the governor of the island, Sir Hugh Foot, it was a near miracle that the hope of peace had dawned at last. Indeed, the presence in London of the much-discussed Archbishop Makarios, now indisputable fact, would have seemed quite out of the question only a week or two ago, yet here he was.
The conference began with each delegate playing his expected role. Selwyn Lloyd read out the Zurich agreements. Averoff described them as the best possible, and Zorlu agreed. Then Makarios spoke. He said that while he accepted the agreements as a basis, he would like just a few amendments. The conference was stunned. Averoff telephoned Karamanlis in Athens, who flew to London and immediately ordered that Makarios be brought to meet him. Makarios said he had promised to sign, but he was sorry. He had now changed his mind.
Then Karamanlis told him very calmly, but in a very strong voice, that I want you to know one thing. My policy on Cyprus is fixed. We have monographed these agreements in Zurich. It's finished, that's the agreement. That's my policy. If you don't agree, I will not change my policy. It's fixed. And he left.
Makarios was given one more night to accept the deal. War or peace in Cyprus hung on his decision alone. If he decided to fight on now, how many Cypriots would follow him?
And that was the most critical evening for the Archbishop. I remember I went to his room and I stayed with him until midnight. And I remember Archbishop was smoking. He was a heavy smoker. Smoking and thinking. I told him good night and have a good sleep. And he told me, I wonder if I can sleep this evening. So next morning I went first and knocked his door, and he said, I have already given my answer. I have contacted the Greek representatives and I told them that I will sign. That was the story.
This day, a new chapter opens up for the people of Cyprus, a period of peace and prosperity and freedom. The two communities in the island, working closely together within God's guidance, will, I have no doubt, be able to develop the welfare of the island to their common benefit.
The Cypriots' struggle was entirely successful in the military sphere
as history will pronounce one day. However, its accomplishments were not duly exploited by the political leadership.
Grivas did not dare clash with Makarios. He reluctantly ordered his men to lay down their arms and went home to Greece. But he was to return later to plague Makarios. The Archbishop moved into Government House as President of the Republic of Cyprus.
After the end of the war? Oh, yeah. I came here just to take my belongings, you know. Before I telephoned to the ADC and I asked him to give me my salary. He said, "Are you crazy?" he said. And I told him that if he denied to give my salary, I blow him up. He said, "Come on, the government house belongs to you now," he said.
If you're interested in having a permanent record of the many interesting events covered in the series End of Empire, there's a hardcover book available at your ABC shop and at all good booksellers.